Questions for disciples of censorship. Once those you disagree with have been silenced, what comes next? So I actually order this A, B, C, and D, so I'll do this correctly. A, first question. Once those you disagree with have been silenced, what comes next? B, who determines the definition of hate speech? C, how do young people learn to identify evil if all references to it have been removed? And D, where do the silenced go? And I link to my selection of modern religions. Okay. So, I do have a series that I'm continuing called The Questions for Disciples of, and then I list a modern religion, and then we get down to the nitty-gritty. And I'm putting these out there as open questions. I want to hear the answers. And I want to hear not just the answers, I want to hear as many answers as you can give me and give the rest of us, because these are great questions. If people are advocating for censorship, they should have at least some sort of argument to back it up. And if they don't have an argument, and if censorship is a good idea, I don't think it is. But if it's a good idea, in the contexts and situations that people are, advocating for censorship in, I'd like to hear the good arguments, and I'd love to make a really informed decision. At this point in time, I'm a pro-information guy. I'm a free speech guy. For the Americans out there, I'm a First Amendment guy. It's a it's a flawed document because it's not free enough. There's not enough liberty in it, and it did not have the framers and the founding fathers. They did not have the prescience to see like the internet and all those things. So of course there's limitations to the First Amendment, and I'm glad that we have a Supreme Court right now and in the past that has largely upheld the intent, I believe, of the First Amendment, which is to maintain freedom, liberty, and choice for all Americans. That's a big important thing, and censorship just, So once you okay, let me, all right. Let's get this right. So, once those you disagree with have been silenced, what comes next? So there's this idea of echo chambers. We know what they are. If you're watching this video, you can certainly research, but I'll say that an echo chamber is when you have a community of people or a group of people that is essentially following a singular narrative about reality. And that narrative may be right, it may be wrong. It's more likely, usually almost exclusively, somewhere in between. And if you're only hearing from one side of a situation where there's multiple sides to the story, multiple perspectives that hold merit, being in an echo chamber deprives you of the full data set, the full amount of information that other people may be using to make their decisions that to you, at that point, because you've been deprived, don't make sense. Because of censorship, you're not hearing the whole story, so your argument might make less sense given that there's enough empirical evidence to sort of make the case for this story that you don't believe in. So if you're echo chambered, you're more likely to believe bullshit, basically, because you've only been introduced to one side. No matter what side you're on, if you're talking about politics and you say it's like, if you stick to the binary world of left and right, if you stay in the left echo chamber and hear only the left side, you're going to hear nothing but derision for the other side. If you stay in only the right echo chamber, you're only going to hear derision largely for the left side. And the people in between are the people that I like to listen to because I want to hear everything. I want to hear everything. And it gets harder and harder the more that, these, right now, since, media is how you get your information, excuse me, social media is the new modern public square. So, of course, it doesn't make sense if certain arguments and certain ideologies are always censored in comparison to the other ones. I don't want to name names, but I'll do one for each side. Trump supporters get sort of censored by the left, and you have your progressives getting censored on the right. And really, it's not about the left and right in this case. It's about the corporations. They're the ones, and the neoliberals, the ones that have power right now. They're the ones, I'm talking mostly in an American context. The paradigm is different in different countries and different media markets. But, it's really difficult for these sort of movements to get any traction when the power is concentrated elsewhere and the money is concentrated elsewhere. And believe me, when you are playing a game, it's always important, if this game is called, politics or media or news or entertainment or any of these sort of Hollywood, these big industries, if you're not playing the game, business, if you're not taking advantage of every ability you have, every superpower, every opportunity, or at least being aware of them and being able to choose whether or not to take advantage of them, you're at a disadvantage. So people do cling to this notion that, you just keep fighting, but really it's follow the money all the way around, typically. It's follow the money if you're dealing with a situation where there's advertisers and there's... Now, the only way we can fix this, well, one of the only ways is to sort of, I believe in an Internet Bill of Rights, which would be a document that sort of details, among other things, the role of these social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. Like, would they be ruled as publisher or platform? Right now, they have the luxury of sort of, they're considered a publisher, but they're really the place that, decides a lot of major decisions. If you think about social media and how it affected our election and our past elections, the internet has affected our elections, so it's important that we have the full picture. And when you're being censored, whether you're on the left or the right or somewhere in between, or if you're independent or whatever it might be, it's just not conducive to keeping people informed. It's literally anti-information, and I'm pro-information, and I think that most people are. So why would you censor? Why would you censor people? I mean, usually it's well-intended. It's well-intended. Censorship is often well-intended. I think we can agree. But who determines the definition of hate speech? You could, and I discussed this a little bit before in a video I did called Generating Racism. Now, don't generate racism on my behalf, but I did talk a little bit about how, it's all a continuum. Different people have a different idea of what otherism and racism are. They have a different threshold for when they consider a statement or any sort of speech to be hate speech against any kind of group or person. Hate speech needs to be credible, essentially, to be, in my mind, as somebody that's nearly a free speech absolutist, not quite, but nearly, I would say that hate speech is a credible threat and something that is unequivocally dangerous. I can barely speak. So yeah, I need more free speech. Free up that speech, buddy. That's so weird. So hate speech is like racism. It's one of those things where someone says that's hate speech, And in reality, it's something that offended them, but it's not really something that, I'm not sure if they read it wrong. I'm not sure if what the reasoning might be, but other people look at it and they look at it through their lens and they go, that's not hate speech. That's just discussing a topic that you find uncomfortable. We have allowed people to speak in a sort of not very credible way, violently talking about, attack the president and attack people, and people justify certain forms of what would be hate speech, and then turn around and say that something much less credible and much less offensive is hate speech. So at that point, you just go, look, hate speech is subjective. Who determines the definition of hate speech? It's in the eye of the beholder what hate speech is, okay? We have things we can come to a consensus on, like credible threats. And there are other forms as well. But it's certainly subjective, and we have to be very careful when we think about the authority that determines what hate speech is, because things could slide down very quickly. We are in the United States of America. We are sort of we're a little bit spoiled. We don't really even recognize how much. A lot of us don't. I believe that I do, but a lot of people don't seem to recognize how much free speech we have, and that's why I never want to undermine it. I want to export it. I want the whole world to be able to talk about what's right and what's wrong, what they're thinking, and be able to just discuss stuff and get to the bottom of stuff. And it helps science, it helps culture, it helps peace to talk. The only way to get rid of hate speech is more speech. You want to make those people that are actually spewing hatred in the world, that is harmful, you want those people to be called out, and if it makes sense, you will have to remove them. But it can't be the first resort. There has to be some way to censor them without removing their free speech, as long as they're not breaking laws. So it's a tough thing. It's a tough question. I'm not saying that I have the definitive answer, but I have my beliefs, and I believe I semi-articulately stated them. How do young people learn to identify evil if all references to it have been removed? Yes, how do you identify evil when there's no reference point for evil? Right? How do you know what evil looks like if you've never seen it before? It's about as simple as that. And the thing is, young people need to see what's wrong. It's better to have visual persuasion to help them to understand what isn't acceptable, what won't pass. And if you're removing every single person that you disagree with, or every single person that you believe is evil because they happen to, be willing to go into topics that you're not comfortable with. Now, we're not talking about real hardcore racists here, or otherists, or identitarians that want, that are really, white nationalists or black nationalists, or any kind of group that seeks to sort of really, as I described earlier, we are macroorganisms, but we also have this thing called philosophy, and we have this thing called intelligence and an awareness that there's better, more peaceful ways for life forms to coexist on this ancient planet. And to exile every person you disagree with off of not just deplatforming them, but also depersoning them and making it impossible for them to get a credit card or a bank account or a loan. That sort of demonetization of somebody, completely just reducing their ability to have a presence in the economy and a self-sustaining presence in society is not right either. But we're just talking here about evil, any kind of evil. You need to have an example to go point to it and go, that is evil. That's evil. And it's not. That's what you have to watch out for. Okay, like you need to have that. You need to have that there so that people can say that's wrong. You need to have something. You can't just be a concept, because a concept will lead you down that road of defining what hate speech is and defining what evil is, and people will start to manipulate others using their own boogeymen, among other considerations. So it's a very difficult thing. And finally, where do the silenced go? Where do the silenced go? Well, a lot of the bad people, the really bad people, not just the ones that you disagree with if you're pro-censorship. If you're pro-censorship and you're knocking people down and you're closing the door on them and you're saying, you know what, he doesn't deserve to have a PayPal, Patreon, whatever it might be. He doesn't deserve to have ad revenue. If you happen to be a content creator or somebody like that, or a big name or a small name, even somebody that's just sort of, talking on the internet, where does an extreme personality go? Well, they go underground. There's no stopping it. This is the inertia. There's no stopping these people. They're just going to, the only way to really stop them is to educate them. And the only way to educate them is to show them, and hopefully in a sort of peaceful manner, you're able to show them that what they're thinking right now, these immoral and disgusting thoughts and attitudes, and even, God forbid, actions, are wrong. They need to have, that discussion needs to be had. And if you just get rid of them, well, they can either, they go underground, either they stay solo, but really they find someplace else to get together. And they group up. Strength in numbers, brothers and sisters. Strength in numbers. You don't want people, you censorship lovers, and I know there aren't many of you out there. I pray there aren't. And this is directed at the disciples of censorship. So those that are disciples of censorship, God bless you. I don't support your cause whatsoever. I'm agnostic. I'm pretty much atheistic on the modern religion known as censorship. But I'm telling you that you don't want to exile these people. At least not immediately, not in any quick manner. And then it's a very, I don't have the answer actually what to do. I don't think we really have the answer, to be perfectly honest. It's difficult when somebody is just deranged, destructive, dangerous, violent. I don't know where those people should go. I do know that they have no place on family-friendly platforms. I know they don't. People that are disruptive and dangerous and just want to hurt people, and they're willing to make credible threats, these people don't belong in the public square. They belong someplace else. That is something that I think we can all understand. But this is why you don't want to expand the definition of hate speech to include too many conditions, too many situations. You want to be very careful and make sure that, the range of acceptable, discussion is as wide and as broad as possible. That's the goal of free speech, to make sure that everybody that's reasonably credible has a louder voice. And it's a market. It's a free speech is like a free market. It's capitalistic. People will find you to have more merit the more that your viewpoint turns out to be predictive and or true. that's just the case. You know, if you were Nostradamus and you were able to sit there predicting every little thing that could happen, yeah, more people would, you know, the word would get out. The word would totally get out. You know, as I discussed sort of a little earlier in this video about lying, people talk. People want to know who's credible and who isn't. And it can destroy a journalist's career, and it can destroy the life of somebody that's you know, not a journalist or not somebody in the public eye if they just lie all the time. And if they're a bit, and like lying as one negative behavior, but like just bad people.